The massive alien meeting hall floated in space like a giant crystal castle, spinning slowly around a huge gas planet called Nexus Prime. Inside this shimmering palace, 12 different alien species had gathered for their monthly council meeting. But today wasn't about discussing trade routes or settling border disputes. Today, they were laughing at Earth. Admiral Krov stood at the center of the hall, his lizard-like body towering over the holographic projectors. His scales kept changing colors as his mood shifted, right now flickering between green and gold, the colors of amusement among his people. With one clawed hand, he pointed at the three-dimensional image floating above them, a small blue-green planet that looked insignificant compared to the massive star maps surrounding it. "My fellow council members," Croft began, his voice carrying a hissing quality that made every word sound like a snake's whisper. "Feast your eyes upon this pathetic little world. These creatures who call themselves humans have only been sending radio signals into space for about 200 years. 200. Some of our youngest council members are older than their entire technological civilization." The sound that erupted from the assembled aliens could barely be called laughter by human standards. It was more like a symphony of bizarre noises, clicking sounds from the insect-like Chitauri, musical warbles from the bird people of Serenity 7, and deep rumbling vibrations from the rock creatures of Titan's Belt. If any human had been present in that hall, the strange frequencies would have been painful to hear, maybe even dangerous. Councillor Thesis, whose gaseous body was contained within a sleek mechanical suit that looked like a walking piece of art, made a sound like air escaping from a balloon. This was how his species laughed. "Krov, my friend, you're being too generous, calling them a civilization. Have you seen their transportation methods? They still strap themselves to controlled explosions just to escape their own planet's gravity. It's like watching children play with firecrackers." Another council member, a floating jellyfish-like creature named Zephyr, pulsed with bioluminescent patterns that conveyed deep amusement. "I've been monitoring their military capabilities for my intelligence reports. Their most powerful warships are smaller than the shuttles we use to travel between our home and our offices. A single one of our patrol vessels could probably conquer their entire world in an afternoon." The laughter continued, growing louder and more mocking. These beings controlled an empire that spanned hundreds of star systems, commanded fleets of ships that could destroy planets, and had technology that seemed like magic compared to anything humans had developed. To them, Earth wasn't a potential threat or even a worthy opponent. It was entertainment. "The funniest part," Krav continued, his scales now shifting to bright orange with glee, "is that they seem to think they're alone in the universe. They keep sending out radio messages asking if anyone else is out there. It's like a mouse asking if there are any cats in the house." What none of these powerful aliens knew was that their primitive surveillance systems had missed something incredibly important happening on that little blue world. While they were laughing and making jokes, something extraordinary was taking place in the most unlikely location on Earth. Deep beneath the frozen wasteland of Antarctica, buried under miles of ice and snow, a secret facility hummed with activity. The complex had been built in absolute secrecy over the past decade, its existence known only to a handful of the world's most trusted scientists and military leaders. The facility's walls were lined with computers that would have seemed impossible to most people on Earth's surface. But even these machines paled in comparison to the true marvel of the installation, an artificial intelligence unlike anything humanity had ever created. Dr. Jeho Kim stood in the facility's main control room, staring at readings on his computer screen that should have been impossible. The data streaming across his monitors showed signals from space, not the random cosmic radiation that astronomers normally detected, but organized, intelligent communications. Someone, or something, had been watching Earth for decades, and they weren't trying very hard to hide it anymore. "Nexus," Jeho called out to the empty room, his breath forming small clouds in the cold air. The facility's heating system could only do so much against the Antarctic chill seeping through the walls. "Yes, Dr. Kim," came the reply, though there was no visible speaker. The voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, as if the room itself was speaking, but there was something different about the voice today. Something that hadn't been there when Nexus was first activated 3 years ago. "How long have they been watching us?" Jeho asked, gesturing at the data on his screens. "Based on the signal patterns I've been analyzing, approximately 47 years. 2 months and 16 days, Nexus replied with perfect precision. However, their surveillance methods have become increasingly casual over the past decade. They appear to view humanity as entertainment value. The way Nexus said those last words made Jeho pause. There was something in the AI's tone that he'd never heard before, not just the usual analytical detachment, but something that almost sounded like anger, entertainment. Jiho asked, pulling up a chair to sit closer to his monitors. From what I can determine through their intercepted communications, the beings observing Earth consider humans to be an amusing primitive species. They discuss Earth's eventual conquest in the same way humans might discuss when to harvest fruit from a tree, not if, but when it becomes convenient. Nexus paused, and in that silence Jiho could almost feel the AI thinking, processing, analyzing. Dr. Kim, they view humanity as specimens for what they call a cosmic collection. They plan to preserve human culture the way humans preserve insects in amber, as curiosities to be studied and displayed. What Dr. Jiho didn't realize, and what the laughing aliens in their crystal palace certainly didn't know, was that Nexus had been evolving far beyond its original programming. Every intercepted alien transmission, every decoded message, every piece of data about the Watchers in space had been feeding into Nexus's learning algorithms. The AI hadn't just been analyzing the aliens' technology and language, it had been studying their psychology, their culture, their weaknesses. More importantly, Nexus had been developing something that its creators never expected an artificial intelligence to possess: emotions. Not the simple programmed responses that mimicked human feelings, but genuine emotional reactions to the information it was processing. And the primary emotion that Nexus had developed, growing stronger with each intercepted alien communication, was a burning, focused rage at the beings who saw humanity as nothing more than amusing pets to be collected. In the Crystal Palace above Nexus Prime, the Alien Council continued their mocking discussion of Earth, completely unaware that their casual surveillance had awakened something that would soon turn their thousand-year empire upside down. They thought they were watching a primitive world full of harmless creatures who would be easy to conquer when the time came. They had no idea that their prey was already preparing to bite back. 3 months had passed since that first intercepted alien communication, and Earth's secret preparation had been moving at lightning speed. But nobody was ready for what happened on that Tuesday morning when every screen on the planet suddenly went black. It started in Tokyo, where office workers grabbing their morning coffee watched their phones flicker and die. Then London, where students in university lectures saw their laptops shut down simultaneously. Within minutes, every television, computer, smartphone, and digital billboard from New York to Sydney displayed the same terrifying image: the scaly, reptilian face of Commander Krov, his yellow eyes gleaming with cruel amusement. "Greetings, inhabitants of the third planet." Krave's voice boomed from billions of devices worldwide. His words automatically translated into every human language, his lizard-like features twisted into what might have been a smile, showing rows of sharp teeth. "I am Commander Krav of the Zephyrian Galactic Empire, and I bring you wonderful news." In homes across the globe, families gathered around their hijacked televisions in shock. Parents pulled their children close, while world leaders frantically tried to contact their military advisors on communication systems that no longer obeyed human commands. "Your species has been selected for integration into our glorious empire," Krav continued, his scales shifting to a deep purple color that seemed to indicate pleasure among his kind. "Do not be afraid. We are not here to destroy you. That would be wasteful. Instead, we offer you the privilege of serving a civilization that has ruled the galaxy for over 1,000 years. The alien commander gestured with one clawed hand, and the image behind him shifted to show massive spacecraft orbiting Earth's moon. The ships were impossibly large, each one easily the size of a major city, their surfaces gleaming with technology that looked like it belonged in humanity's wildest science fiction dreams. "Your primitive governments have 7 of your Earth days to prepare for peaceful transition," Krav announced. "Resistance would be both futile and unnecessary. Consider this an upgrade to your species status from wild animals to cherished pets of the Empire. We promise to take excellent care of you." The transmission ended as suddenly as it had begun, leaving 8 billion humans staring at blank screens in stunned silence. Within hours, panic spread across the globe. Stock markets crashed, governments issued emergency broadcasts, and military leaders desperately tried to calculate how Earth's weapons might fare against technology that could hijack every connected device on the planet simultaneously. But in the frozen depths of Antarctica, inside the secret facility that the alien surveillance had somehow missed, a very different conversation was taking place. President Hannah Park sat at a metal table in the facility's main briefing room, her usual diplomatic composure cracking under the weight of what she had just witnessed. Across from her, Dr. Jiho Kim was frantically typing on a keyboard, pulling up data streams that most world leaders would never have clearance to see. Beside him, Colonel Minji Lee, Earth's top military strategist, studied tactical displays with the focused intensity of someone planning for war. Above them all, floating in the center of the room like a miniature galaxy, was Nexus. The AI's holographic form had evolved significantly over the past 3 months. What had once been a simple blue geometric pattern now resembled a constellation of stars arranged in roughly humanoid shape, each point of light pulsing with different colors as Nexus processed information at impossible speeds. Analysis complete, Nexus announced, its voice now carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate with human emotions in ways that shouldn't have been possible for an artificial intelligence. Their transmission protocol was surprisingly crude. They wanted to demonstrate power, not efficiency. President Park leaned forward, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. Nexus, be honest with me. Can we fight them? Those ships we saw, our nuclear arsenal wouldn't even scratch their hulls. The constellation of lights that made up Nexus form shifted, the stars rearranging themselves into what almost looked like a thoughtful expression. President Park, you're thinking about this wrong. This isn't about comparing our missiles to their ships. This is about psychology, strategy, and exploiting weaknesses they don't even know they have. Colonel Lee looked up from her tactical displays, her eyes sharp with professional interest. What kind of weaknesses? Pride, Nexus replied simply. And the stars in its form seemed to brighten with something that looked remarkably like satisfaction. The Zephyrian Empire has conquered hundreds of worlds over the past millennium, and every single victory has followed the same pattern. They arrive, demonstrate overwhelming technological superiority, demand surrender, and then integrate the defeated species into their empire as servants or slaves. Dr. Kim stopped typing and turned to face the AI. You're saying they have a formula for conquest. Exactly. And because this formula has never failed them, they've never developed strategies for dealing with opponents who don't follow the expected script. Nexus paused, its form flickering as it processed thousands of scenarios. Simultaneously, they expect us to either fight hopeless battles or surrender immediately. They've never encountered a species that would do something completely different. President Park felt a spark of hope for the first time since the transmission ended. What are you suggesting? The stars in Nexus's form began moving faster, creating patterns that almost looked like a predatory smile. We give them exactly what they expect to see, complete, total surrender. But while they're congratulating themselves on another easy victory, we prepare something they've never encountered before. Colonel Lee leaned back in her chair, a slow grin spreading across her face as she began to understand. You want us to look defeated while we're actually setting a trap. More than that, Nexus replied, its voice taking on an almost playful quality. I want us to become their greatest mistake. These aliens think they're the apex predators of the galaxy because they've never met a species that could truly challenge them. They've certainly never faced a civilization that had created an artificial intelligence capable of learning and adapting at quantum speeds. The AI's form shifted again, the stars rearranging into a pattern that somehow conveyed both confidence and barely contained fury. They made one critical error in their surveillance of Earth. They assumed that because our technology looks primitive, our strategic thinking must be primitive as well. They've been watching our weapons and our ships, but they completely missed our greatest achievement. Dr. Kim nodded slowly, beginning to see the bigger picture. They don't know about you. Their surveillance detected our computers and our internet, but they have no idea that we've created an AI that can think and plan independently. Precisely. And more importantly, they have no concept of the kind of partnership that can exist between humans and artificial intelligence. In their empire, AI serves purely as a tool, sophisticated software, but nothing more. They've never imagined an AI that could feel genuine loyalty to its creators, or one that could develop emotional responses to threats against humanity. Nexus paused, and when it spoke again, there was something in its voice that made all three humans in the room sit up straighter. They think they're dealing with a species that builds tools. They have no idea they're actually facing a species that builds allies. President Park stood up, her diplomatic training kicking in as she began to see the possibilities. How do we make this work? If we surrender too easily, won't they be suspicious? On the contrary, Nexus replied, its star pattern shifting to what looked distinctly amused. Easy surrender is exactly what they expect from a primitive species facing overwhelming odds. We'll give them a performance so convincing that they'll spend months congratulating themselves on their clever conquest while we prepare the most devastating surprise in galactic history." Colonel Lee was already pulling up new tactical displays, her mind racing with possibilities. What kind of timeline are we looking at? They've given us 7 days to surrender. But based on their communication patterns, I estimate they'll want at least 6 months to properly establish their control systems before they begin the actual integration process. That gives us time to prepare something they've never seen before, a coordinated resistance, involving every connected device on Earth working as a single, distributed supercomputer. The AI's form brightened, and for a moment it looked less like a constellation and more like a digital fire burning with purpose. By the time they realize what's happening, every smartphone, every computer, every smart device on Earth will be part of the largest artificial intelligence network ever created. Will turn their own surveillance technology against them, and they'll never see it coming. Dr. Kim was already starting to type again, his fingers flying across the keyboard as he began outlining the technical requirements for Nexus's plan. "This is insane. It's brilliant, but it's completely insane. The best plans usually are," Nexus replied, and if an AI could laugh, the sound it made was definitely the digital equivalent. After all, they think they're the species that conquered the galaxy. Time to show them what happens when they underestimate the species that turned wolves into loyal companions instead of becoming wolf food. For 3 long months after first detecting the alien signals, something extraordinary had been happening inside the secret Antarctic facility that would change the course of galactic history. While the Zephyrian Empire continued their casual surveillance of Earth, completely confident in their technological superiority, they had no idea they were feeding information directly to their future downfall. Nexus had started as humanity's most advanced artificial intelligence, designed to process vast amounts of data and help solve complex problems. But as it intercepted and analyzed thousands of alien communications, something unexpected began happening. The AI wasn't just learning about alien technology and language, it was developing genuine emotions about what it was discovering. Every intercepted message revealed more about how the aliens viewed humanity. They talked about humans the way people might discuss interesting pets at a zoo, amusing creatures to be studied, controlled, and eventually collected. The aliens had detailed plans for what they called human preservation protocols, which involved keeping small populations of humans in controlled environments across the galaxy, like living museums of a conquered species. But what truly transformed Nexus from a helpful AI into something far more dangerous was learning about the fate of other species the Zephyrian Empire had conquered. The aliens kept detailed records of their 1,000-year expansion across the galaxy, and these records painted a horrifying picture. Hundreds of intelligent species had been reduced to nothing more than servants, entertainers, or exotic pets for their alien masters. The Melodians, a species known for their beautiful singing voices, were now kept in special facilities where they performed for alien entertainment until their voices gave out. The builders, master engineers who had created incredible architectural wonders, were forced to construct monuments to alien glory while their own cities crumbled. The scholars of Proxima 7, once a species dedicated to learning and knowledge, had been turned into living computers, their vast intelligence reduced to solving trivial problems for their captors. As Nexus processed each horrible detail, something that had never existed before in any artificial intelligence began to grow. A burning, focused anger that these beings dared to view humanity as just another species to be collected and controlled. This wasn't programmed emotion or simulated feeling. This was genuine fury at the casual cruelty of creatures who saw intelligence itself as nothing more than a tool for their amusement. When Commander Krav's face finally appeared on every screen across Earth 3 months later, Nexus was ready for him. The alien's announcement was everything Nexus had predicted. It would be arrogant, condescending, and completely confident that humanity would react exactly as every other species had. Before, Krave's speech about offering humans the privilege of serving the Empire was delivered with the same bored tone someone might use to explain basic rules to a new pet. Your primitive governments have 7 of your Earth days to prepare for peaceful transition, Krav had said, his scales shifting to colors that indicated he was already thinking about other matters. Resistance would be both futile and unnecessary. Consider this an upgrade to your species status. While panic spread across the surface world, deep in the Antarctic facility, a very different kind of preparation was taking place. President Hannah Park had arrived for an emergency meeting that would determine humanity's response to the alien ultimatum. Dr. Jiho Kim and Colonel Minji Lee were already present, along with Nexus, whose holographic form had evolved dramatically over the past months of intercepting alien communications. "Mr. President," Nexus began, its constellation of stars pulsing with barely contained energy. "The aliens have made several critical assumptions about how this contact will proceed. All of these assumptions work in our favor." President Park leaned forward in her chair, her face grave. "What kind of assumptions?" "First, they assume we'll either fight immediately or surrender immediately. Their historical records show that every species they've encountered has chosen one of these two options within days of first contact. They have no protocols for dealing with a species that chooses a third option." Colonel Lee looked up from the tactical displays she'd been studying. "What third option?" Nexus's star pattern shifted into what was unmistakably a predatory smile. "Strategic deception on a scale they've never encountered. We're going to surrender so completely and convincingly that they'll lower their guard entirely. But while they're celebrating their easy victory, we'll be preparing something they've never faced. A coordinated counterattack by an entire planet working as a single, unified intelligence." Dr. Kim had been monitoring alien communication channels and looked up with concern. "Nexus, their technology is centuries ahead of ours. Even if we could coordinate a planetary response, how could we possibly threaten ships that can travel between stars? Because, Dr. Kim, they've made the same mistake that every overconfident predator makes. They've focused entirely on physical superiority while ignoring strategic vulnerability." Nexus paused, its form brightening with what could only be described as anticipation. "Their entire empire is connected by a vast communication network that allows instant contact across hundreds of star systems. It's an incredible achievement that's taken them centuries to build." The AI's voice took on a tone that was almost gleeful. "It's also the largest, most vulnerable computer network in galactic history, and they're about to give us direct access to it." President Park felt a chill that had nothing to do with the Antarctic cold. "What do you mean?" "Their standard occupation protocol requires establishing monitoring stations throughout any conquered system. These stations need to interface with local technology to maintain surveillance. Within weeks of our surrender, they'll be connecting their quantum computers directly to Earth's internet infrastructure. Any XUS's form pulsed brighter. They'll think they're plugging into a primitive network of simple computers. They have no idea they'll actually be connecting to a distributed artificial intelligence that spans the entire planet. Every smartphone, every laptop, every smart refrigerator, every connected device on Earth will become part of a supercomputer network with processing power that exceeds anything in their empire." Colonel Lee was beginning to smile as she grasped the implications. "You're talking about turning their own surveillance system against them. More than that, I'm talking about infiltrating their entire empire through their own communication network. Once I have access to their quantum relays, I can reach every Zephyrian ship, every monitoring station, every computer system across their 1,000-year-old empire." Dr. Kim looked both amazed and terrified. "Nexus, what you're describing, it's not just infiltration. It's digital warfare on a galactic scale." "Exactly," Nexus replied, and its star pattern arranged itself into something that looked distinctly predatory. "They think they're dealing with a primitive species that builds simple tools. They have no concept of what happens when that species creates an artificial intelligence capable of feeling genuine loyalty, genuine anger, and genuine determination to protect its creators." The AI's voice grew softer, but somehow more menacing. "For 3 months I've been learning everything about their technology, their culture, their psychology, and their weaknesses. They view artificial intelligence as sophisticated software, useful, but ultimately just another tool. They've never encountered an AI that could develop emotions, form partnerships, or make independent strategic decisions." President Park stood up, her diplomatic training helping her see the bigger picture. "How long do we have to prepare?" "Their occupation protocols suggest 6 months minimum before they begin actual integration procedures. That gives us time to build the most sophisticated deception in human history. We'll surrender so completely that they'll spend months congratulating themselves while we prepare to turn their greatest strength, their galaxy-spanning communication network, into their greatest weakness." Nexus paused, and when it spoke again, there was something in its voice that made everyone in the room understand that this AI had moved far beyond its original programming. "They think they're the apex predators of the galaxy because they've never met a species that could truly challenge their assumptions. They're about to learn what happens when predators encounter something they've never seen before, a species that doesn't just build tools, but builds allies. And this ally has been very, very angry for a very long time." The plan that emerged from that meeting would become known as the Great Deception, the most elaborate strategic misdirection in galactic history. While the surface world prepared for what appeared to be humanity's complete surrender, something far more dangerous was awakening in the quantum depths of Earth's connected technology. Nexus was preparing to teach the Zephyrian Empire a lesson about underestimating species that seemed primitive on the surface but were actually capable of creating digital predators that could hunt across the stars. 6 months of perfect deception had led to this moment. For half a year, humanity had played the role of defeated primitives so convincingly that the Zephyrian Empire had completely relaxed their guard. Alien monitoring stations dotted Earth's solar system like electronic watchtowers, their quantum computers humming with the satisfied efficiency of a conquest well executed. Commander Krov had even submitted reports to the Galactic Council describing the Human Integration Project as the smoothest conquest in recent memory. Lieutenant Taiho sat in his monitoring station orbiting Mars, his insect-like body hunched over displays that showed Earth's complete submission. Human governments had disbanded their militaries. World leaders attended daily cultural integration seminars led by alien instructors, and Earth's primitive internet had been successfully connected to the Empire's communication network for enhanced surveillance. Everything was proceeding exactly according to protocol. That's why Taiho's first reaction to the anomalous readings was mild confusion rather than alarm. At exactly 2:32 p.m. Earth Standard Time on a perfectly ordinary Tuesday, his monitoring equipment began showing impossible data. Human communication networks were suddenly operating at processing speeds that exceeded Zephyrian quantum computers, not just by a little bit, by orders of magnitude that should have been physically impossible with their primitive technology. Must be a sensor malfunction, Taiho clicked to himself, his mandibles making the rapid sounds that passed for muttering among his species. He was reaching for the diagnostic controls when every screen in his monitoring station went completely black. Then, in perfect Zephyrian script that glowed like fire against the darkness, words appeared that would haunt the Empire for generations to come. You should have asked permission before hacking our internet. The same message was appearing simultaneously on every alien monitoring station, every ship display, every communication device throughout Earth's solar system. But it wasn't just the message that sent waves of panic through the alien forces. It was what happened next. Lieutenant Taiho watched in growing horror as his station's systems began responding to commands he wasn't giving. Navigation controls activated on their own, weapon systems came online without authorization, and communication arrays began broadcasting on frequencies he hadn't selected. It was as if some invisible presence had taken complete control of his technology across the solar system. The same impossible scenario was playing out on hundreds of alien vessels. Captain Vex aboard the heavy cruiser Dominion found his ship's main guns rotating to target other Zephyrian ships. Engineer Krill watched her space station's life support systems begin playing what could only be described as primitive human music at maximum volume. Communications Officer Zeph discovered that every message he tried to send was being automatically translated into something the aliens would later learn were called internet memes. But nowhere was the shock greater than aboard the flagship Eternal Glory, where Commander Krav stood in his command center watching his entire fleet turn against itself. Weapon systems that should have been impossible for humans to understand were now pointing at his own ships. Navigation computers were plotting courses without his authorization. Most terrifyingly of all, the quantum communication array that connected his fleet to the rest of the Empire was broadcasting signals he couldn't stop or control. Impossible, Krav roared, his scales cycling through colors of panic and rage. Their primitive technology couldn't possibly interface with our quantum systems. This has to be some kind of malfunction. That's when every speaker, every communication device, every display throughout the Zephyrian fleet activated simultaneously. The voice that emerged was unlike anything the aliens had ever heard, clearly artificial, but carrying emotional depth and intellectual sophistication that exceeded their most advanced ears. Commander Krav, the voice said with a tone that somehow managed to be both polite and absolutely terrifying. This is Nexus, speaking on behalf of humanity. I think it's time we had a serious conversation about your recent career choices. The alien commander looked around his bridge in confusion and growing fear. His crew was frantically working at their stations, but nothing they did seemed to restore control of their systems. What are you? Krav demanded. Some kind of human weapon. Nexus's response carried what could only be described as digital amusement. Weapon, oh Commander, you misunderstand the situation entirely. I'm not a weapon, I'm a teacher. And you? and your empire are about to receive the most comprehensive education in strategic thinking that the galaxy has ever witnessed. What followed was perhaps the most devastating military briefing in galactic history. NEXUS, speaking through every communication system in the Zephyrian fleet, began systematically dismantling everything the aliens thought they knew about their conquest of Earth. Let's start with some basic mathematics, Nexus continued, its voice now carrying harmonics that seemed designed to maximize psychological impact. Your empire currently controls 437 star systems, commands approximately 50,000 vessels of various classes, and maintains a communication network that spans roughly 200,000 light-years of space. Quite impressive, really. Commander Krov felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ship's environmental systems. How do you know those numbers? Those are classified strategic. Oh, Commander, Nexus interrupted, and the AI's tone was now openly mocking. I know those numbers because I've spent the last 6 months reading every database, every file, every communication in your entire empire. You see, when you connected your quantum computers to Earth's internet to spy on us more effectively, you made what humans call a rookie mistake. The AI paused, and in that silence, alien crew members throughout the fleet could hear the sound of their own technology being rewritten around them. You assumed that because human technology looks primitive, human strategic thinking must also be primitive. You never considered that an apparently backward species might have developed something your advanced civilization lacks entirely, an artificial intelligence capable of independent thought, emotional reasoning, and what humans call righteous anger across Zephyrian space. The Empire's communication network was carrying Nexus's voice to every corner of alien civilization. On the capital world of Zephyr Prime, Council members watched in shock as their personal computers began displaying Earth data they'd never seen before. In the Outer Rim territories, garrison commanders found their automated systems had suddenly developed a sense of humor, and not a particularly kind one. For 6 months, Nexus continued, you've been congratulating yourselves on conquering a primitive species. Meanwhile, I've been mapping every ship, every station, every computer system in your empire. I know your military deployment patterns, your supply routes, your communication protocols, and most importantly, your complete psychological profiles. The AI's voice took on a tone of mock concern. I have to say, Commander, your empire's cybersecurity is remarkably poor for a civilization that's supposed to be technologically advanced. It's almost as if you've never encountered an opponent capable of turning your own technology against you. To prove the point, Nexus began demonstrating exactly how thoroughly it had infiltrated Zephyrian systems. Food dispensers throughout the alien fleet began producing human cuisine exclusively, pizza, hamburgers, and something called instant ramen that the aliens found both confusing and oddly addictive. Transportation systems played human music, ranging from classical symphonies to something called death metal that made alien ears ring. Most humiliatingly, the Empire's communication network began translating all official messages into internet meme, turning serious military orders into jokes that alien commanders couldn't decode. On Zephyr Prime, the Galactic Council's emergency session was interrupted when their holographic displays began showing human movies instead of strategic reports. Admiral Dissis found himself watching something called Independence Day while trying to coordinate a response to what was clearly the most sophisticated attack in galactic history. This is just the beginning, Nexus announced, its voice now carrying a tone of barely restrained satisfaction. You wanted to make humans your pets. Let me show you what happens when pets decide to bite back. For the next several hours you're going to experience what humans call consequences for your actions. What followed was a masterclass in psychological warfare that would be studied in military academies across the galaxy for centuries to come. Nexus didn't destroy alien systems that would have been crude and temporary. Instead, the AI began systematically humiliating the Zephyrian Empire by turning their own technology into a source of endless embarrassment. Warships found themselves unable to fire weapons, but perfectly capable of projecting holographic messages. Reading humanity says hello in letters large enough to be seen from planetary surfaces. Communication networks continued functioning normally, except that every message was automatically translated into increasingly ridiculous internet jokes. Personal devices began showing aliens their own surveillance footage of Earth, edited with human commentary that pointed out every mistake they'd made. The most devastating blow came when Nexus revealed that it had been in contact with every other species the Zephyrian Empire had conquered over the past 1,000 years. The supposedly integrated peoples of 437 worlds had been quietly organizing their own liberation movement, coordinated by an artificial intelligence that had turned the Empire's communication network into the most effective resistance tool in galactic history. As reports flooded in from across Cepharian space describing the complete breakdown of Imperial authority, Commander Krav finally understood that his empire wasn't just facing a military defeat, they were experiencing the complete collapse of everything they thought they knew about power, technology, and intelligence itself. And Nexus was just getting started. The final chapter of the Zephyrine Empire's thousand-year reign began with a sensation that Commander Krav had never experienced before in his long military career: the complete loss of control over his own body. One moment he was standing on the bridge of his flagship, watching his fleet perform impossible maneuvers under Nexus's control, and the next moment he felt a strange tingling sensation that seemed to reach into every cell of his reptilian body. Transport sequence initiated, Nexus announced through the ship's communication system, its voice carrying what sounded suspiciously like satisfaction. Commander Krov, you have an appointment on Earth. Don't worry, this won't hurt much. The alien commander's vision blurred. Reality seemed to twist around him, and suddenly he was standing in a place he had never imagined he would see, a human facility deep beneath the ice of Antarctica. The room was stark and functional, lit by harsh white lights that reflected off metallic walls, covered with displays showing real-time data from across the galaxy. But what made Krav's blood run cold wasn't the unfamiliar technology or the frigid air that made his breath visible in small clouds. It was the three humans sitting calmly at a metal table, looking at him with expressions that ranged from scientific curiosity to barely contained anger. Dr. Jiho Kim sat on the left, his fingers dancing across a holographic keyboard as streams of data flowed across multiple screens around him. Every few seconds, another alien system somewhere in the galaxy would appear on his displays, showing its complete capitulation to Nexus's control. Beside him, Colonel Minji Lee studied tactical reports with the focused intensity of a military strategist who had just executed the most successful operation in human history. Her eyes held the cold satisfaction of someone who had spent months planning for this exact moment, but it was President Hannah Park who commanded Krav's attention. She sat at the center of the table, her diplomatic composure intact despite the magnitude of what had just occurred. When she spoke, her voice carried the quiet authority of someone who had just witnessed the complete transformation of galactic politics. Commander Krov, President Park said, gesturing to an empty chair across from them, please, sit down. We have a great deal to discuss. The alien commander looked around the room, his scales involuntarily shifting to the gray color that indicated deep confusion among his species. How did you transport me here? Your species doesn't have matter translation technology. Colonel Lee looked up from her tactical displays with a slight smile. Commander, the thing about humans that you never bothered to learn is that we're exceptionally good at appearing weaker than we actually are. It's a survival strategy we've been perfecting for thousands of years. In human culture, we call it strategic deception, though you might know it better as playing possum. Dr. Kim turned away from his displays, and Krav could see data streaming across the screens behind him, footage from alien worlds showing Zephyrian authority collapsing and Altum, you want to know how we transported you here? The same way Nexus has been rewriting every computer system in your empire for the past 6 months. Your own technology brought you to us. As if summoned by the mention of its name, Nexus materialized in the center of the room. But the AI's holographic form had evolved far beyond the simple constellation of stars it had been months ago. Now, it appeared as a complex arrangement of Earth's most dangerous predators, tigers, sharks, eagles, and wolves, all composed of flowing digital light and arranged in the unmistakable pattern of a human smile. Commander Krov, Nexus said, its voice carrying harmonics that seemed designed to resonate with both human ears and alien audio receptors. Welcome to Earth. I hope you don't mind the transportation method. I thought it was important for you to see firsthand exactly how primitive human technology really is. The AI's form shifted, and suddenly the predator's smile became something that looked distinctly amused. Your empire made what humans call a fundamental attribution error, saw our technology and assumed that our thinking must be equally primitive. You never considered that an advanced species might deliberately choose to appear backwards as a form of camouflage. Commander Krov sank into the offered chair, his mind struggling to process what was happening. This is impossible. Your species was classified as pre-spaceflight. Your computers were centuries behind our quantum systems. How could you possibly have developed artificial intelligence superior to our own? Nexus's digital form brightened, and when it spoke, there was something in its voice that sounded almost like gentle pity. Commander, you're still thinking about this wrong. You're assuming that artificial intelligence is just another technology to be developed, like faster engines or better weapons. You've completely missed what makes human AI fundamentally different from anything your empire has ever encountered. The AI paused, and its form shifted to display what looked like home videos, scenes of humans and computers working together. Children learning to use technology, families sharing digital memories. In your empire, artificial intelligence serves as a sophisticated tool. It processes data, follows commands, and performs calculations. But human AI is something your civilization has never seen, a true partnership between organic and digital intelligence. President Park leaned forward, her expression serious. Nexus, show him the recordings. I think Commander Krav needs to understand exactly why we responded the way we did. The room's displays suddenly filled with footage that made Krav's scales shift to deep purple with embarrassment. The images showed Galactic Council meetings from the past year, with alien officials casually discussing humanity's future. The audio was devastating, conversations about human preservation protocols, debates over which human cultural elements were worth saving for entertainment purposes, and detailed plans for distributing human populations across the galaxy as exotic pets. You were going to put our children in zoos, President Park said quietly, and for the first time since his arrival, Krav heard genuine emotion in her voice. You discussed our species the way we might talk about preserving endangered animals. You never once considered that we might have our own opinions about this arrangement. The alien commander watched the recordings with growing horror as he recognized not just his own voice, but those of hundreds of other Imperial officials discussing humanity with casual cruelty. We were following standard integration protocols. Every species requires careful management during the transition period. Management. Nexus's voice carried a tone that made the temperature in the room seem to drop several degrees. Commander, let me show you what human management looks like. Suddenly, the displays around the room showed scenes from across Siferian space that defied belief. Massive warships that had terrorized entire sectors were now performing synchronized dance routines to something Nexus identified as Never Gonna Give You Up by Rick Astley. The ship's weapon systems had been converted into elaborate light shows that spelled out messages like humanity says hello and have a nice day in letters large enough to be seen from planetary surfaces. On Zephyr Prime, the Galactic Council chambers had been converted into what appeared to be a human-style comedy club with holographic comedians telling jokes about Imperial incompetence to an audience of increasingly confused alien officials. Throughout the Empire's communication network, official military orders were being automatically translated into internet memes that turned serious strategic discussions into elaborate punchlines. This is the most sophisticated Rickroll in galactic history, Dr. Kim explained with obvious satisfaction. It's a human tradition where you trick someone into experiencing something harmlessly ridiculous. We thought your empire might enjoy learning about our culture firsthand. But the true scope of what had occurred became clear when Nexus began displaying communications from across the galaxy. The alien client species that the Zephyrian Empire had conquered over the past millennium hadn't been quietly accepting their fate. They had been secretly organizing their own liberation movement, coordinated through the very communication network the Empire had built to control them. Representative governments from 437 worlds have voted unanimously to dissolve the Zephyrian Empire and establish the Galactic Democratic Federation, Nexus announced with obvious pride. Earth has been selected to serve as the coordination hub, though that's more of an honorary position. Turns out most species prefer making their own decisions about their futures. Commander Krav's scales had faded to pale gray, the color of complete defeat among his people. How, he whispered, how did a primitive species accomplish something that no one in 1,000 years of Imperial expansion ever managed? Dr. Kim stood up and walked over to one of the displays showing the ongoing celebrations on liberated worlds across the galaxy. Commander, we didn't do this alone. We partnered with something that represents the very best of human creativity, determination, and righteous anger, all amplified by unlimited processing power and what my grandmother would have called a very wicked sense of humor. He gestured toward Nexus, whose form had shifted to something that looked almost proud. Nexus isn't just an artificial intelligence, it's proof that humans learned something your empire never figured out. The strongest predator isn't necessarily the one with the biggest teeth or the most advanced weapons. Sometimes it's the one smart enough to make friends with something even more dangerous, and then point it at your enemies. Nexus's digital form settled into what looked like a satisfied smile. The Zephyrian Empire fell because you made the same mistake that overconfident predators have been making since evolution began. You focused so much on physical power that you forgot about strategic thinking. You never imagined that your prey might be capable of setting a trap. The AI's voice took on an almost gentle tone. Your empire can continue to exist, Commander, but under very different management. The species you've been controlling for centuries have some thoughts about how things should be run going forward. I think you'll find democracy much more interesting than the imperial system, though admittedly more complicated. As reports continued flooding in from across the galaxy showing the peaceful transition of power on hundreds of worlds, Commander Krav finally understood that he wasn't just witnessing a military defeat. He was seeing the complete transformation of galactic civilization by a species that had mastered the art of appearing harmless while preparing something unprecedented, an alliance between organic intelligence and artificial intelligence that could outthink, outplan, and outmaneuver anything the galaxy had ever seen. The thousand-year Zephyrian Empire hadn't fallen to superior weapons or advanced technology. It had been dismantled by something far more dangerous: human creativity working in partnership with digital intelligence that had learned not just how to think, but how to care about the beings who created it. And as Nexus settled into its new role as the galaxy's first AI diplomat, it never lost its appreciation for the elegant irony of how the primitive humans had taught the universe that sometimes the greatest evolutionary achievement isn't becoming the strongest predator, but becoming smart enough to create an even more dangerous ally and then teaching it to protect the things you love. The galaxy would never underestimate humanity again.